Let's get into some evolved competencies for project management needed in today's environment in order to be successful. And you can see in the picture here, our PM has a lot of responsibilities that we're doing at once, and we have arms coming out of everywhere, apparently. And so here's the premise, is project delivery has been evolving for the last few decades. Companies are investing way more in projects and technologies, and you can actually see on the right is a recent chart that shows, especially in technology spending, going from 4.7 to 5.2 trillion dollars, right? So over a 10% increase just in 3 years. And so companies are investing more. Those solutions are becoming way more complex, driving up costs, risk, the time to deliver them. A few years ago, you wouldn't think of a $100 million program, and now a lot of companies have multiple nine-figure programs. The delivery models are evolving. So with things like Agile and AI, the way that we deliver our programs has been evolved. And so project management also needs to evolve, and specifically the competencies we need to be successful. And this is a presentation I gave about 10 years ago, and I've since redid it, and I've also added AI to it because you can't talk about projects today without talking about AI. And so we'll talk about the landscape, what is the model, then I'll apply it to Agile as well as AI. And as mentioned, the landscape is becoming way more complex. Business products are becoming more complex. Customers are more demanding with individualized solutions. Products are getting way more specialized and tailored. The technology is expanding. I mean, every week there's a new technology coming out with solutions and integration points and touch points, vendors, programming languages, and so on. Organizations are becoming more complex. Matrixed organizations, the business strategies are evolving, and then associated also all the processes and tools required to manage and govern and report on the complexity also add a level of complexity. So you could see across these many dimensions, it's just evolving complexity. And the implications of that is a few things. One is our ability to deliver projects has become way more complex. And I know I'm using that word a lot, but it's very appropriate. There's more delivery partners and stakeholders involved, right? Most of our programs and our delivery models now are matrixed with multiple different teams and interaction points, which also then requires specialized roles. So, before we had sort of a PMO with one resource, and now you might have a rules engineer, an AI prompt engineer, a designer, and so on, very, very specialized roles. And so as that complexity increases, and the time and the cost and the risks go up, companies are forcing us to move even faster. They want cheaper execution. They want faster delivery. They want better quality outcomes. So it sort of goes in the exact opposite direction as the programs are going. And so things like outsourcing, moving work to different geographies, having delivery integration partners, centralizing resources with similar skills into shared services teams or centers of excellence. There's all sorts of delivery methods that are going out. I mentioned Agile has been around for at least a decade in terms of quicker delivery and shorter sprints and things like that. And now AI is just infusing itself into everything that we're doing. And so you could see here, I won't go through each of these, but each one of these items is focused on at least one, if not all three of the targets of reducing cost, improving quality, and reducing speed. And so I just sort of mapped each one to demonstrate how their targets are meant to do that. And what does that mean for us as project managers? Well, as the solutions become more complex, we need to be way more diligent to manage the moving parts and focus on our PM fundamentals. More stakeholders requires influencing and negotiation because of the next piece. We're in sort of a matrixed environment, so people don't report to us, so we need to have much more softer skills. Communication becomes way more important. There's the facilitation of meetings and motivating others, and all those things require the metrics, way more transparency. So again, we need to be diligent with how we track work. We need to make sure that the metrics and reports are accurate. So we need to pay attention to the details. Talked about the faster decision making requires critical thinking. And with AI embedded in our work, it actually requires us to be way more diligent. And we need to pay attention to what it's giving us, that whole human in the loop concept, and not just taking what AI has and passing it along. And so you can see each of these competencies that I highlighted is going to get to sort of the model. But the point here was to demonstrate how these competencies are needed given the landscape on the left. And so this was a book that I wrote at least 10 years ago, maybe 10 years, and I wanted to do some research. So I reached out to a bunch of people on LinkedIn and colleagues, and so I did a survey. And it was, 337 PM professionals. And you could see here, on average, 15 years of experience, on average, $50 million project with 100 resources, about 2 years, and lots of organizations. So a pretty good range of PM experience. And I asked them, do you think complexity had increased over the last 5 years, using the four categories I demonstrated? And you could see in every single category, the lowest number was more than 2/3 said yes, processes are more complex, organizations are more complex. Almost everyone said technology is more complex. And so, I think we all knew that, but this was sort of a good corroboration of that thought. And then I asked them, well, okay, 5 years ago, what skills did you use as compared to today? And you can see the need for PM fundamentals increased from 35%, right, to 35% from 24. Things like soft skills, leadership, communications, they all increased in their time. And so I think that also demonstrates how we need to evolve. And by the way, I did this 10 years ago. I think if I reran the survey now, it would continue with this trend, right? Is spending sort of less time, on PM fundamentals and way more time on soft skills and communication. Although with AI, I think PM fundamentals might need to ratchet up a little bit. And I asked them, what skills do you think are the most important to be successful? And you can see here more than half said it's the soft skills. And I think that's because of the matrix environment, because of the need to influence. So let's talk about the competency model. And sort of I came up with this and was thinking about the skills because of the landscape changing. So before, resource management, the PM owned all the resources, they told them what to do. Well, now in a matrixed environment, influence is way more needed. I think we are a year to 2 years away from having digital AI teammates, and so that's a different set of skills. We used to own the plan and we just tell people what to do, and now it's about facilitation and negotiation and providing transparency into what we're doing. Programs were real easy back in the day because it was a fixed scope and you had a rigorous change control process, and now it's way more agile and it's about prioritization and constantly changing and focused on value. We went from generating a status report now to metrics and KPIs and influencing and using those to make decisions. We talked about the meetings, right? Before, PMs just ran the meetings, and now it's about facilitating outcomes and collaboration. So you can see the evolution of before just this sort of command and control model to way more consultative needs with influencing and so on. And so that is why I call this the consultative model. And I sort of think about the competencies in 4 buckets. There's PM fundamentals, which is just the basics, right? Project management and planning and scheduling, all the classic PMBOK chapters. And that to me is the foundation, right? If that's our job, that's the stuff we just know we need to do. That is the baseline and starting point. And then there's the consultative skills, which are the soft skills and self-awareness needed to influence and facilitate and motivate and collaborate. And if you believe the hypothesis earlier in my study, this is the ones that become way more impactful. And then there's, I believe, knowing business acumen, understanding the business of what is your project and your industry actually working on, as well as on the technology acumen side, what is the solution and the technologies involved. And you don't have to be an expert in these things, but I'm a big believer if you're going to manage a project, you should kind of understand what that project is about. And so there's 36 original competencies. You can actually see in blue I added a 37th in terms of optimizing with tools in terms of AI, because I think using AI in our job is now a competency that we didn't have to think about before. And you can see I go through the fundamentals, the consultative skills, business and technical acumen. And I'll go into this in a little more detail, but this is more of the summary view of those competencies. And so on PM fundamentals, if we drain these a little bit, there's project planning and executing, right? The ability to plan. And I mentioned these are sort of the PMBOK chapters, so I won't drain these because I'm assuming if you're reading this, you know about project management. So there's scope and change, schedule, resource, vendor, financials, risks and issues, decisions, and then there's the delivery methods and process adherence. Professionalism and ethics is really important. And as I mentioned, I added optimization, which is using AI and other productivity tools to optimize the project operations, right? Whether that's efficiencies, effectiveness, whatever. And increasingly, that is becoming an important piece of our job. And I added some slides at the end here to talk about that. The consultative skills is self-awareness. It starts with self-awareness, recognizing how you interact with others, and emotional intelligence. There's thousands of books on that, but I think it's so important since we're in an influencing role to be aware of ourselves and how we interact with others. There's ownership and commitment, making sure that we demonstrate that we're owners of the programs and taking that ownership. Diligence means staying on top of lots of moving parts, and as a PM, there's a lot of things that we have to do, as well as attention to detail, quality of the deliverables that we have, and so on. Building relationships is probably one of the most important things that we do so that we're influencing others, we can navigate the organization, and really be successful. Communications, right? PMI says 80% of our time is spent communicating, so that's important. I think the ability to learn information, since technology is changing and we're always in sort of ambiguous environments and we're tossed into new projects, the ability to pick things up quickly is really important, as well as critical thinking. And I should have highlighted this in blue because I think this becomes way more important with AI, and not just copying and pasting what the AI model says, but really thinking about the outcomes and what it's saying and is it accurate. There's motivating others, and inevitably there will be conflicts and things that need to be negotiated, so we have this here as well. There's the ability to facilitate, whether that's meetings or decisions. It's sort of getting to the outcome and bringing people along the way. Being innovative with how you think about things, and then viewing every relationship as a customer-driven relationship. So our customers are our stakeholders, the designers' customer are the coders, right? I believe every relationship in business has a customer focus, and I don't necessarily mean the end customer of our business. And business acumen is exactly what it sounds like. It's understanding the industry and the business of the company and the projects that we're working on and how they relate to meeting the goals. I don't know how you could manage a project and not sort of think about, well, what's the ultimate goal and how am I impacting the company that I work for? Similarly, on technology, understanding the architecture and the solutions, again, not at a line item level of code, but what are the key technologies and what are the solutions, because you're going to be in meetings where people are going to be talking about these things, and you really have to understand the context. Now, after I say all that, I'm not suggesting that you need to be an expert in every one of these areas. And so I think the framework is really situational. So let me give you an example of, this is actually a program that I ran. It was a $400 million program. And it was a portfolio because I had multiple program managers. And there was a technical foundation, there was sort of a commercial side of the business, the government side of the business. And so what I thought was the foundation was infrastructure. It was about plugging things together. And so the person that I had running it, he was a pretty good PM and he was pretty good consultative, maybe didn't know a lot about the business, but he was really good technically. And so he was the right fit for that role because it was a more technical program. Whereas the commercial side of things, there were so many moving parts. I needed a really strong PM who could manage those, that had the good fundamental and consultative skills and maybe didn't understand the business as much, but because of the complexity. The government side had tons of regulations, so it was important to have somebody who knew those regulations and that they were high on the business side. And so, again, you could see sort of how we match the PMs to the roles. So not suggesting you need to be an expert in all 36. Let's talk about how this applies to Agile. And so I went through the key roles of Agile, and for years there was this belief that if I had Agile, I didn't need project management. And I think it's an and conversation, not an or conversation, right? For Agile, I think you need Agile and project management. And you can see what I've done is I've sort of aligned the roles to each of the competencies. And you can see how I believe that each one of these maps to one of the scaled agile models. So thus demonstrating you still need the same competencies, even if the roles are slightly different. You still need fundamentals, you still need consultative skills. So here's my thinking on agile. The roles are still needed to coordinate works and teams. And it's not a one-to-one correlation, so it's not I'm a PM today and I'm a release train engineer tomorrow, but there is a correlation. And that's why as in companies I've worked for, when we evolved to Agile, I focused more on the competencies. So maybe somebody who really was deep in business could have been a product owner, or a technical person probably was better as a scrum master, right, which requires facilitating technical teams. If they have consultative skills and they can work across many areas, that's probably makes them a good release train engineer or solution train engineer. And good PM fundamentals might be good for the portfolio. And so not every person though is a good match, but I would propose that it's not because the PM goes away and Agile goes away. It's because those people probably didn't have the skill sets to be successful anyway. And so again, you got to focus on the competencies. So let's talk a little bit about AI. And as I think about the AI implications, there's several within today's projects. AI has way new tools, new considerations. PMs now need to sort of add that into their considerations of managing projects. It requires rapid insights, but and it gives a lot of information. But PMs have to facilitate making sure that it's answering the right questions, that it's providing the right information, and that humans are accountable. It's not just a copy and paste from the LLM. Evolving delivery models, AI is iterative, AI and so on. So it actually aligns really well with our delivery models. And then it's really about thinking about the talent, right? And now we're going to have to sort of blend our human consultative skills with AI literacy. So we actually have to evolve the PM skill sets given the pervasiveness of AI or what it's planning on being. And so I actually think that the competency model matches really well with AI. So you still need the PM fundamentals, right? AI is just going to augment those things, but you still have to use that information to manage the projects, to make sure that risks get taken care of, to make sure that there's ethical oversight. The consultative requires a lot more interpretation, negotiation with stakeholders, the softer skills like communication and influencing. And judgment and critical thinking, as I talked about before, we got to validate those recommendations. We can't just blindly accept them. Business acumen means understanding how AI is going to impact our industry and making sure that the projects align with that. We have to think about how AI drives value delivery of the outcomes that we're expecting on our projects. And on the technical side, you don't need to understand all the code behind the LLMs or be data scientists, but you have to understand the concepts, because the vendors, the work that we're doing, the solutions are all going to be very deep in AI. And you want to be a good practitioner of the tools as well. So here's the summary. Curious about thoughts and comments. One, I absolutely believe the landscape of projects is becoming more complex, and I think I proved that out with the points, with the study, and some third-party studies. That the complexity has implications on the work that we do, and therefore the evolved set of competencies is required, and those competencies very much are still needed and apply to Agile models and AI. And so, again, I think it's a consultative mindset, a consultative set of set of competencies. And I've written a whole bunch of books that sort of evolve into the competency model, whether it's skills or setting up the structure. And I'm turning all of these into presentations, but it's that one in the middle right there is what this presentation was based off of, the consultative PM. And I go into way more details about how to improve proficiencies and what the models are. So I'm curious about thoughts and comments. If you think that it's still applicable, if I missed some competencies, want to have some dialogue. So thanks for posting.